This is talk number 3 of the February 89 3-day retreat. I have written out a number of questions. Again, some question representing several people asking a similar question and not being able to decide right now with which one to start. I'll read them all and then we'll see. I don't seem to be able to avoid having an image of myself. Just in sitting, having the image of sitting here. Is this already being dualistic? Is that all there is to this work, observing the way we are? Or is there something else? Very often at the beginning of a retreat, I feel a real resistance to going. This time it almost felt as though I was going to my own suicide. Why is that? I feel just like these little water bugs that you talked about, skimming over the pond all the time. Not just here, but in my daily life. Over the surface, with no depth. I feel a need to be alert in order to feel safe. And with this feeling, being alert in order to feel safe, goes a sensation of physical discomfort. In being with children, one sees they have a great need for being loved, being secure, and getting recognition. And we as adults have those needs too. Listening to you, I get the feeling as though there was something wrong with this. As though for you this is all ego. And then I want to turn away from you and not listen. Here in this sitting room and feeling anger and not being able to express it as I'm used to expressing it. I feel I'm distancing myself from it. As I understand what you're saying, I'm just saying this is anger, and with that there comes a distance already. I'm not really getting in touch with it. How is one to be with anger without distancing oneself from it? Do thoughts ever stop? I think we start with the very first question. I don't seem to be able to avoid having images of myself. Right now, and sitting here, the person said in the meeting, I have an image of myself. No, in sitting down on the mat, the person said, I have an image of myself sitting. And isn't that already dualistic? Is it? Can we look right now? We're sitting here, all of us. There's very easily comes an image of sitting, blue collar, gray sweater, a pendant here, dark blue pants, one foot a little bit bent backward, the other one forward. I can see all of that. Don't have to look. Hands on the thighs. One can have a fairly or quite accurate image of oneself. And maybe we have it most of the time, I don't know. Often that what there is this mirror image of oneself coming up. Particularly if one closes one's eyes. There it is. What's dualistic about it? Or is there more? Is there a reaction to this image? A thought, I'm looking pretty good in this outfit. Or I wish I had something different on, which would look better, fit better. One has to look. What's going on? Is there an attachment to this image of oneself? Not just seeing it for something that the brain produces. We don't quite know how, but there it is. One can see it. Not as clear as when one looks into a mirror, but there is some kind of a memory image of how one thinks one looks. The brain produces it. But is there all that is? And is that seen for what it is? Or is there immediately the thought, this is me, is a picture of me? And an attachment or a rejection of it. I like the way I look. I hate the way I look. With that, something else comes into being. Me and my image. And the relationship between me and my image, attachment or rejection. And if there is attachment to the image, then someone saying, how sloppy you dress today. It's like maybe a mother used to say to one, and now somebody is saying it. Maybe nobody would say that except the mother. We don't sometimes say to our best friends what we say to our children. There's hurt. What is it that gets hurt? We ask in every retreat. No retreat goes by. Almost no talk goes by in which we don't ask, please, let's find out what it is that gets hurt. Does it have to do with this attachment to this image, which I think is me, the attachment to me as an image? Because what I am this moment and yesterday and the next moment is a flowing, moving process, which no image can capture. The image is a fragment. As the only thing fixed about oneself is the idea one has about oneself. And of course one has many fixed ideas about oneself, not just one. That's the only thing fixed. The process of this being is moving, changing, different in each relationship. Different on a sunny day maybe, or on a cloudy day, in the country or in the city. At a cocktail party or with some friends informally around a kitchen table. So there is this fixating of what one thinks one is through image, idea, and not just one, but a whole collection of it, always to be added to. And the attachment to that collection, like we're attached to our picture albums of how we were over the years. Got a whole you have no idea how many pictures I have at home. Because my father was into taking pictures from the day I was born. There were movies and pictures. So I always had a very vivid image of myself, even though I didn't probably remember it. All these movies were being played. And enormous amounts of paper pictures. Eventually they became colored. Right now I wouldn't mind if a windstorm swept them all away. But, well, when you have a husband, you have to get along. And you don't just throw things out, you try to agree. And we haven't agreed over this big pile yet, so it's still there. So photography has aided a lot in invention of the mirror and invention of the camera has aided a lot in telling us what we look like and what we are. Although Narcissus did it with a little pond of water. That was enough to fall in love with that picture. It's an interesting thing. He didn't die because he realized about self-image and died to that self-image, but because there was too much attachment to it, drowning in that attachment. That's one way of dying. The fear that comes up in retreat, I may be dying, I may be going to my own suicide. Is that the fear of, I may die to all this collected imagery of myself, what I feel as me? And then what will happen? One has to find out. So coming back to the question, having an image of myself sitting here, or if a crow flies by and is caw, 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 is an image maybe of a black bird against the white sky. Is there a separation in that? One has to see. Not just make a statement or conclude from what one remembers, maybe not quite accurately what Toni said, that in that there is division. One has to see for oneself, is there division? Is there a feeling of separation, me and that crow? Because I'm saying crow, because I'm visualizing a crow? But we're usually asking questions, although we're also making statements. But they are to be questioned. What we're asking is, in hearing this caw, 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 is there any sense of division? Or does that come up the moment one thinks crow, and that's a distraction, and I wonder why crows don't migrate like other birds? Thoughts like that, and then the mind is caught up in knowledge, and there's no more hearing of this caw, caw, caw. Likewise, and we went through it, if there's just an image coming up of oneself sitting there, that's just one of the phenomena of this moment. But if there's attachment, rejection, wanting to look better, or comparing oneself with other people who have nicer sweaters and so forth, then there is division, feeling separate. Through this process of thinking and comparing and judging and rejecting and attaching, you can all see it for yourself. You don't have to believe me. Don't believe anything you hear, but find out. Close to that is the other question, which is a big one. Children do need love, affection, security, being held close to a human body. All kind of devices recently have been invented to make children be contained in first there was a wooden container, a cradle, now it's plastic. And swings to, one winds them up and then they swing. It can be a great relief for a mother to have the child in one of those containers, because she has to prepare supper and there are a few others around. One of our grandchildren could sit for the longest time in one of those devices. The other one wanted out. She didn't want to be in there at all. Cried, fussed. It was worse than before she was in it. So in picking her up and carrying her around, because she didn't like to hear her cry, the mother wondered and despaired whether she would ever have an independent child. And yet she sort of stuck with it, carrying this child around. And today she's all over the place, exploring and looking in different rooms. She doesn't have to cling to the mother, but she likes to touch space every once in a while. Yes, there's no question about it that children need all kinds of things: food, sucking, warmth, a dry bottom, particularly if it's urine, being held, talked to. every kind of security that can be provided. One thing that was also mentioned by the person was recognition. Not just one, several people brought it up. Isn't that also a basic need for a child to be recognized, given praise? And we've talked many times about this here. And we can talk about it again. That as far as my observation goes of little children, they don't need that unless they have become habituated to it. And in this society, in our culture, civilization, maybe all over the world, which raises children with the method of praise and blame, reward and punishment, one becomes habituated to it, as the mother and father and as the child. And then, of course, one needs it, one is addicted to it, one has to get more of it. But it's been so revealing to watch little children do things for minutes or hours with an intensity of joy, absorption, interest. And then an adult who will praise the child for what he or she is doing is a sort of a real, almost violent interference with what is going on. The child wasn't asking for that, and all of a sudden, here, she's praised for it. And then one wants that again, because it's wonderful to have 2 eyes, 4 eyes, 6 eyes, or a whole stadium of eyes upon one. The audience becomes important. I've talked several times about walks at different times in the life of our grandson, when he was very little, doing all of these things. No self-consciousness, not watch me, but just exploring. And now when we go together, playground, school or whatever, watch me, Grandma, see me. And the activity isn't the important thing completely anymore, but it's someone watching. And with that, a diminished attention. He can still get almost totally absorbed in Mario Brothers, Nintendo game with the little control thing, video game. And yet he will ask whether I'll come and sit with him while he's playing. And in the beginning I couldn't stand that. That goes with it. But he said, I can turn it down, Grandma. So he turned it down that you can almost not hear it. And it's really very interesting. We could have a whole talk about Nintendo. It's modern myth, fairy tale, slaying one dragon after another. I guess there are others. He doesn't have those where it's human beings, one shoots and so forth. But these are little mythical figures. One is called the Mad Monk, and it has shaven monks in there who have to be overcome to get to the Buddha statue and by the Buddha statue toward another mad monk. And always it has to be flexibility. The thing that worked last time in overcoming this monk doesn't work this time. You have to find a different way. Maybe completely the opposite of what you're used to doing to get rid of that figure. And you die many times in the process. course Ben says, I'm dead now. I died. And then of course, one flip of the switch and there he is alive again, going It's great because I used to reject that whole stuff. And now we can talk about it. When I arrived this time, he told me, last time he didn't get out of one thing, he just couldn't get beyond it. And this time he told me how it was. He had to dig. He had to dig deeper, or whatever it was. So, since we talked about the video game, let's take it one step further. One time, I may have mentioned it here too, at Christmas time he had gotten a new video game, and he is really quite excellent at it, took it over to relatives, and started playing it. And there were, particularly the adults, the children don't say, oh, you're terrific at it. The kids just watch together. But the father of the uncle and another uncle who had also played with these video games, they were very much taken with Ben's facility and expressed it. So Ben started to become very cocky. You could see it. And he didn't play half as good as he did at home. Made many more mistakes. And didn't want to share this thing with anyone else. He just wanted to be the center of attention because it was provided. Without its being provided, it is not needed. Once it is provided, we become addicted to any new input that makes us feel good about ourselves. The image grows and becomes more and more effective in supplying energy, good feelings as well as bad feelings. It goes both ways. No, I'm not just saying this is ego, and I don't even use that word. One has to understand it by watching it, seeing for oneself what the image does. The good one as well as the bad one. The positive as well as the negative one. See it in operation. Not get the idea it's not good to praise, and therefore from today on I'm not going to praise my children anymore. It's like withdrawing instantly alcohol from an alcoholic. What the answer is, I don't know. But if one observes in oneself and in children, then maybe one will find a new way, which doesn't withdraw and doesn't reinforce something that is a vehicle of isolation, separation, sorrow. Because my good feelings today are my despair tomorrow due to this image. It's an accurate observation if one sees, I don't like what she says, it upsets me, and realizing one doesn't listen anymore, or the listening narrows down, one doesn't hear anymore. Yes, that's how it is. If we don't like something, we hear, we stop listening, or the listening becomes distorted. That's why at the beginning of a first talk, we're asking, is it possible to put like and dislike aside and listen, at least for a little while, freely? Put the like and dislike on hold Not that one becomes a person who has to divest herself of all her likes and dislikes. We're not talking about that. And if it comes up, nonetheless, which it does, one can say these things, but it doesn't mean it works just because somebody says that. Then can one see, as it was the case with this person, how the dislike prevents the listening, shuts it down? That's why in our relationship we don't hear what the other says. Because we don't like what he just said a moment ago. And we don't hear the rest. The rest may be different. The person may see something and change, but we're not listening anymore. We don't hear from him or her. Does talking about this and working at it as we're talking about it, does that make it possible to pay attention to it when it happens again? When one doesn't like something? And watch the dislike close the ear and wonder whether it has to be that way? Because it doesn't. The ear can open again. Because whatever one is hearing or listening to doesn't threaten one's survival. Not one's physical survival, maybe the survival of this image of oneself. But what is that? We're back to that. Why do we have all of our organism in service of keeping this image alive forever? Because this is what our desire for immortality is. Or our fear of dying. Continuing forever as what we know we are. Or what we added to it, what we hope we will become, with given a little bit more time. It's all imagery. What we really are and will be tomorrow, we don't know. Because we always think about it. What are we for one instant of not thinking about ourselves? Or knowing about ourselves? Or attaching to an image about ourselves? What are we? Fitting in with this is the statement, I feel a need for being alert in order to feel safe. And with this whole thing goes a feeling of physical discomfort. Here on this lovely piece of land, one has the opportunity of watching deer. Last night during supper, having supper on the balcony, somebody said 20 deer, 2 herds. First one grazing, and then another one sort of galloping out of the western forest. Not mixing with the other herd, but staying at a distance, grazing and looking and grazing. They were far away, so one couldn't see detail. But something happening, sometimes a person from the retreat will walk into the meadow, and whatever many deer there are, that many eyes are on that person. And then some eyes will remain on that person and other eyes will be down again in the grazing. And if the person gets too close, then with this lovely flash of the white tail, off they go, gracefully. Not, one can't say in panic, frightened. They jump full of grace. Are they alert to be safe? That fits, doesn't it? I don't know whether they feel a discomfort that there may be a hunter creeping up on them. The idea, I don't think, occurs to a deer brain. And have that elaborate size and convolutions the way we do, where we can imagine our enemy creeping up from behind us and feel discomfort whether he's there or not. If there was discomfort in the deer, it couldn't be eating and digesting. So, our being alert to be safe, what is the safety we're looking for? What do we want to be safe? Our physical organism? I used to know a woman who had been raped 2 or 3 times, and she told me how to walk down a dark street if I ever had to do this alone, and watch. How to be alert in order to be safe. And she had a lot of confidence in her ability to be alert, to be safe. I guess in wartime or terrorism time, as so many countries are going through, there must be an incredible alertness on the part of people to be safe from a stone coming, a bomb falling, or whatever. Although sometimes if it is to fight for our independence, for our country, for our homeland, one will not be alert to be safe. One will throw oneself into the melee and be killed if needed for the ideal of my country, my religion, my ideology. I think we all have, if we're at all healthy functioning organisms, we have this inbuilt way of avoiding a danger to our physical organism. A falling tree and we'll jump out of the way. An oncoming truck and we'll run across the street or wait till it's passed. Is that what we mean by safety? Safety for the physical organism? Or is it again this idea of oneself, the image, what I think I am, what I have collected about myself? One person once wrote, I'm finding after many years of doing this that I'm censoring things out of my awareness in order to remain and feel and look attentive. I may not quote it completely right, but is there a new image of the alert one, and therefore the safe one, the attentive one, and therefore secure in attention? Is this mixed up with idea and image? One has to look. No one can see for oneself. One has to see oneself. Examine it. Let it happen. And then look. And then one may find that there needs to be attention in order not to self-protect. Self-protection, and I don't mean of the organism, but of the idea of me, what I am, how I want to be looked at, treated, talked to. We constantly defend and protect that. Automatically. And assuming that's what we need to do in order to feel secure. But attention may reveal that, may reveal the self-defense and self-protection at a moment it arises. And if this attention is there, the defense and protection may not be necessary, because there is nothing to defend except an idea. An idea which brings isolation, division, all the things we've talked about. Separation, sorrow, war, irritation with each other and with oneself. So can one be attentive of one's self-protectiveness? Not, I mustn't be defensive, I mustn't be this or that. We're not talking about that. Can one see it in action? And recently we had a talk about this. That it almost seems one has to have lived through this attentively, not defending, not protecting. Live through it and see it is really not necessary. Because until one has lived through it, openly, vulnerably, one assumes it's necessary, and not even one assumes, it's automatic. It's not questioned. It happens like protecting from the truck or from the tree. That falling tree. So how will we ever find out whether we need to continue with this endless self-defense and self-protection? Can one put it to the test? And that sounds like an intentional maneuver, which it isn't. It's a matter of awareness. And at the moment of someone criticizing one feels the jerk, the knee jerk sort of to withdraw or defend, and as one notices it, not to go on with it, because just because it has been initiated doesn't mean it has to continue. Attention and the intelligence that goes with attention acts. On its own. In a really miraculous way. And of course with a continued openness to what the person is saying. There isn't this not listening anymore, the narrowing down of the senses or the distortion of what the person says. One can really listen to what he or she is saying. And maybe he or she has something to say to one. And maybe there's something to look at, to learn, to find out about. Or maybe the person is coming off the wall, has a problem of his own or her own, which there's so much more openness then to see and feel. It's not a matter of steeling oneself to listen to criticism. That can be learned. I'm sure there are institutes and courses that teach that. It has nothing to do with methodology. It has to do much more with vulnerability, openness, and a consuming interest to find out whether what seems so inevitable, so automatic and programmed need indeed to keep running its inevitable course from generation to generation. We will just take as a last question, is observation of oneself all there is to this work? Is that all? Or is there something more? Or something else? Implied usually in a question like this is, it's so utterly drab, or unexciting, or depressing. But if observation doesn't shrink back, but remains there, one will find that the drabness, the boredom of it, or the tedium of it, has to do with our immediately judging what we see as bad or unimportant, undesirable. And then the pores and the ears closing up not to see too much more of that miserable stuff. When there is no withdrawing, because the judgment is also seen as one of the phenomena of the moment, one of the occurrences, just as the crows cawing and the radiator making its kind of music, then there's no tedium to it. One is learning about this human being, which is all human beings, represents all human beings. Maybe represents is not a good word. Which is not different in these basics of defending, protecting, attaching, fearing the ending of one's image. This is all pervasive stuff in the human mind. We don't have different human minds. We may have different inherited capacities and looks, but the basic mechanics of the human mind is not different no matter where we live or when we have lived. So one is beginning to discover about that. And what makes for friction, what makes for animosity, or what makes for spontaneity in relationship. Because when the image isn't there, then there's spontaneity. The question was, is that all, or is there something else? Can one ask where the question is coming from? Wanting something else? A goal? A goal of a state of enlightenment or eternal peace? Liberation, freedom. And as one looks, and indeed there is such a yearning for something like that, can one look at what that is at that moment with the same kind of observation? Freedom, enlightenment, aren't these concepts and ideas? When there is freedom, there is not the idea, I'm free, or I should be free. Is it that one wants to get this stuff over with in order to get to the better stuff? Sort of two worlds, the world of the tedium of my daily life, my anger, my jealousy, my hurts and hopes and fears, and then some other world in which all of that is overcome, doesn't exist, wanting to get there, a world of ecstasy. I think we have to come back to the question, what is the quality of listening? To an image that came up, to defensiveness, to anger, fear, the crow cawing. What's the quality of listening? Is it fraught with judgment? You should, you shouldn't, then it's not listening, then it's just thinking about what's going on. Listening is naive, innocent, hasn't taken any sides yet. It doesn't know right and wrong. That's put aside. It's vulnerable. Spacious and quiet. So, is it at all possible to listen innocently, naively, quietly, spaciously to what's going on? Inside and out. Not knowing where it will lead one. Not knowing whether this is all or whether this is nothing. Not knowing. in this kind of listening, the more or the not enough doesn't come up. We will end here for today.